And just make sure also that you found it on my YouTube channel. If you missed stuff last week or whatever, I am getting in the groove of putting this up every day right after class. So everything should be up like at this point. Now we're getting into the groove of things, and the first week is done. The first week's a little bit hectic always, but now this stuff should be up probably like around 3 o'clock in the afternoon every day. It'll be up at 3 o'clock, so you can go back and you can listen to stuff. All the sessions from last week that were from Twitch are up, and there's like one that I didn't put up from Zoom. But we should be good with this stuff. Yeah. So if you miss anything, or if you just want to review it, or you just miss my face, yeah, it definitely helps. It helps review. Cool. All right. So let's check this out. The aux tracks. So what we're talking about today is routing. And this is just getting the audio to move around Pro Tools properly. Now, this is really important because it's not just about Pro Tools, it's about everything. As I've said before, I really believe that routing is one of the most important things that you can learn about to get your knowledge just going. It helps with like everything. It's like this, you learning how to use aux tracks, learning how to route stuff is really the secret sauce that's between a good production and an amazing production. There's a big difference there. Like you may have made something that's like, this sounds good, but it doesn't really sound like amazing like what things sound like on the radio. And one of the things that really sets things apart is producers' abilities to route audio and add in extra effects and like route things around and capture different sounds and stuff like that. So it's a really big deal. This is, like I said, it's one of the most important things that you can do. So we're going to be talking about everything routing today. And we're going to be talking about inserts and sends as well. So aux tracks. Aux tracks are really good for three things. We're going to talk about one of them today. We're not going to talk about all of them today. But the one we're going to talk about today is for send effects. And let me just go ahead and show you my desktop. There we go. Okay, so here's what we're looking at. So aux tracks are good for three things. And the one we're going to talk about today is send effects. But the other things they're good for are subgroup mixing and external audio input. And we're going to come back and talk about subgroup mixing another time. But today is send effects. Now, send effects is like taking a split from your signal. So for example, let's go over here and get, let me see here. We worked with this one the other day. Did I save it? Okay, here we go. Let's use this one, not that one. Actually, no, I'm going to use this one because it's like starting from a blank slate, so you can see me do stuff again. It never hurts to see things multiple times. All right, let me just get rid of I don't need the comments. I don't need the delay compensation. Yeah, all that stuff, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and solo out my snare drum here. There's my snare drum. And go ahead and make a master fader here. Cool. All right. So I got my snare drum here, and you can hear the snare drum is just a very dry snare drum sound. Now, if I want that snare drum to sound like it is in a, like if I want this to sound like it's in a, like a room, like a reverb, there's like a reverb, then what I'm going to do is, what's up, Herbie? I'm going to go ahead and use a reverb for this snare drum. Now, the way we do this is using aux channels. So I don't want to put the reverb directly onto the snare channel. That's like a thing that a lot of people do. And you can get away with it, but there's a bunch of reasons why you don't really want to do it like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to keep it right here for now. You can see my aux channel here. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this reverb drums. Reverb drum. And what I do is I always put whatever track it is first. So it's a reverb. Like what is it? In this case, it's a reverb effect. So I put the reverb, and then I put after that what it's for. So in this case, it's going to be a reverb for my drums. And I'm just going to use one reverb for my drums because I want them to all sound like they're in the same kind of place. And then what I'm going to do is go over here. I'm going to put a reverb on here. Any reverb effect will work, but I'm going to use my deverb here because it's what y'all have. And then I'm just going to use this, put the gain up like that. And this is something you only have to do this for this deverb here. So the deverb has the gain right here, put that all the way up like that. And I'm going to choose a room reverb. Let's choose this room number 2. It's a smaller room sound. And go ahead and solo safe that. Now, if I want to send this snare drum sound to the reverb, this is where this comes in. So here, let's take a look at this. What's going to happen is you can see on each track we have our inserts up here and we have the sends. And the send, what it does is it splits the signal out. So if I've got this I/O section here, the I/O section like this is down here. Here's the I/O section, the main out is going to go to the place. And then here is where my sends are. And this is like a split of the signal. So let me just show you what this is going to sound like. If I go out from my main output and I go straight into this, sorry, right here on the snare drum. If I go straight out of my snare drum and go into my drum reverb, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this into a bus 1 and 2. And I'm going to connect this up using the same numbers, bus 1 and 2. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But here's what happens. If I go ahead and set it out, listen to this. Right? That's just a straight up, nothing but reverb sound. Because the whole entire snare drum sound is going into this reverb here. Right? So all we're going to hear is the reverb. And that's not what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and set this back to my main output. And I'm going to go to here to where it says sends, A through E. I'm going to go to bus 1 and 2. And now watch what happens. As I turn it up, so this fader that just showed up here, this fader here is showing me the amount that's coming from here. It's being sent into here. Okay? So this fader right here is how much of my snare drum signal I'm going to send to this aux return. And then as I send more, it's going to become, we're going to hear that reverb sound more and more and more. All right? So in the beginning, we're not going to hear any reverb. So let's listen. No reverb. Okay? As I turn it up, watch what happens. And I turn it back down, that reverb is going to go away. And now we're back to just the snare drum sound. Okay. So it's pretty cool stuff. Who is that? Jordan Deal is here. I do have a YouTube channel. Here, wait, hold on a second. The YouTube channel is, it's not, I don't have enough followers, so it's not like an actual proper name, but I'll put the link in the comments here. My channel. My channel. There you go. The notes are on Canvas. There they are. Cool. All right. So, awesome. The notes are on Canvas. All the notes are on Canvas. So that's where the YouTube channel is. All right. Anyway, so let's just check this out one more time. So right now I've got 3 faders here. Let me also just, here, let's just show only these ones here. Show only selected tracks. There we go. Okay. So now, so we got this here, snare drum reverb here, reverb for the drums. And here is our send amount. So this fader here is actually coming from this one here. Now, in Pro Tools, there is a way you can see just that one there. If I go to here, check this out. If I go to expanded sends, I can actually show the fader right here in my area. I'm not a huge fan of this because it's a really tiny little fader. I wish it was more of a knob like what Logic shows. but I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. But there it is. You can, whoops, wrong one. But yeah, so you can see individual fader sends. But I always like to have the pop-up, and you can get the pop-up just by clicking this bus 1 and 2 here. Click. That shows you, that brings the pop-up up here. Okay. So we got that. So now let's listen to it one more time. Here it is completely dry. And there it is with reverb on it. Now that's a lot of reverb. I'm literally just showing that much reverb just to show you about that. But that's not how much reverb you'd have normally. But there you go, that's how that works, okay? So let's just take a look at the notes here real quick about this. Okay, so it says here, the send, for send effects, the send gets sent to an aux track. Your I/O gets sent to the main left and right out, okay? So each track has 2 outputs. The output is the entire signal, and the send is a portion of the signal. So let's do this one more time. Let's send a track to the reverb. So I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this track here, right-click, and select Delete. There we go. So now we're not going anywhere. Okay, so listen to this. That snare drum, completely dry. Okay, there's nothing here, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go ahead and Command-Shift-N to create a new track. And aux tracks are almost always stereo, almost always going to be stereo. So I'm going to hold down my Command key, click right one time, click down one time. There's our aux inputs. I'm going to give it a name. Let's call this one Reverb Drums. Boom, there's my reverb. Next, so here we go. Set up the input on the aux track to bus 1 and 2. It's a stereo bus. So here I'm going to select bus 1 and 2. And I'm selecting bus 1 and 2 just because I don't have any, I'm not using any buses. So I'm just going to use the first bus that's available. In this case, it's bus 1 and 2. So I set my input to bus 1 and 2. Now I decide which track I want to send to the reverb. In this case, my snare drum track. We're not going to do the 3 toms right now. We're just going to do the snare drum. And I just go over here and I use the send. So utilize the sends, number 4 here, utilize the sends, not the output of the tracks. Don't use the output. It's really important that when you're sending, when you're doing a like a reverb or something like that, a delay, any kind of send effect, that you do not use the output. Okay, so we're going to use the sends. Go over here, click on this, and set it to bus 1 and 2. There's bus 1 and 2. Now, I just want to point out something here. When you set it to bus 1 and 2, you can see bus 1 and 2 has turned orange. The reason why it's orange, this like yellow-orange color, is because there's an input set to that color. So there you go. And now we're going to turn it up. Oops, why? Oh, I don't have a reverb on here. Make sure we put a reverb on the track. Did I not? Is that in the notes? Where is it? Oh, put a reverb plugin on it right there. Sorry. Put a reverb on it. There we go. Cool. Now turn it up. There you go. And we can hear that reverb. Now the cool thing, the reason why I want you to put make an aux channel and put the reverb on an aux channel and not just put the reverb directly on the track is because if I have these tom, let's say I've got this kick drum here, and now go ahead and turn this down. So there's my kick drum. Let's say I want to put a reverb on that kick drum. I want to get a reverb sound going for that kick drum as well. What I can do is I can send the kick drum also to bus 1 and 2. So now we can see this one here. See, it says kick drum. That means this is now representing our kick drum. And now you can hear the reverb on the kick drum. There it is dry. And there's reverb on it. And now our snare drum here, If I hold down Shift, I can click that button and it'll open up my snare drum as well. And now both of these have that reverb on it. The kick is low. Yeah, we'll fix it later. So we got this, right? There's our kick drum, there's our snare drum. Are you using headphones? It's gonna be really hard to hear low frequencies if you're not using headphones. I highly recommend that you use headphones if you can use headphones here for these things, because especially for low frequencies. All right, so question is, so why can't you put a plugin on the same track? Why do you need a send? This is a good question. This is a really good question. So first of all, I could put, let's here. Whoops. Here. Okay, so I got that plugin is gone. I'm just gonna go ahead and mute these, make sure my sends are all the way down. Okay, so now here's what we're listening to. Okay, so we got our kick and our snare. So I got that. Now I could put a plugin directly on a track. So let's do this. I'm going to put a reverb directly on the track here. Deverb. Let's go mono to stereo. So it's a stereo reverb. So we got this, and I'm going to turn it up here, and I'm going to put it directly on. Okay. So there's my snare drum. There's the reverb directly on the track. Now it sounds completely wet. There's none of the dry sound because I put it directly on the track. Well, what I can do is I can mess with my mix level right here. And I can make it so it sounds pretty good. There it is, right there, boom. Okay. Now, I can put the reverb onto my kick track as well. I can just hold down Option and drag it over. So now I've got the reverb on my kick and my snare drum. And so far it sounds fine. It sounds okay. But let's say that your client comes in and your client says, I don't like that reverb. I want a different reverb. Okay, cool. So I go ahead and I go over here and I say, let's change the reverb. Let's change the reverb to the black hole, for example. Black hole does not come with Pro Tools. So here's the black hole reverb. Let's get a preset here. All right. Let's use that one, okay? So let's see here. Catherine A is here, and Eli. You have to tell me your last name, Eli. I don't know who you are. I need two names. Oh, Elijah Morris, is that you? Okay, always make sure you tell me two names, all right? Because I don't want to search around for, I don't have this set up for first names only. I have it set up for first name, last name. 21. I guess so, thanks. Just tell me your first and last name, dude. All right, so so I just put this black hole on here. Now, now what I have to do is I have to copy this black hole over onto all my tracks that would also have a reverb, right? And that's okay because I only have 2 tracks right now, but what if I have a reverb for all my drums? You're gonna have to copy this over a bunch of times. And then what if I wanna make a change to this reverb? Okay, it's cool, I like this reverb, but I don't love how big it is. So, right, so now I have to go in here, and now I have to set that reverb on every single channel. You can see, I hope, how this would start to eat up your time. If you have a lot of stuff going on, especially if you're doing a lot of band recordings and things like that, you're gonna have to end up setting this for a lot of different like tracks, and it's going to eat up your time. But if I have one send effect, and I've got my reverb on that one send, and I'm sending my drums to it, let's get a reverb to get this little plate here, little plate here, and I send this sounds over to it. Cool, there's a nice little plate sound. Now I can send my kick drum over to it as well. Now, if my client comes in and says, I don't like that reverb, I'm like, cool, no problem. I'm just gonna go over here and grab a different reverb. Let's grab this one here. And now, I just changed my reverb for all my drums at the same time without having to go through a whole bunch of stuff. And that's one reason why we use a reverb on a send. Now, another reason why we use a reverb on a send, there's actually two more reasons that are really important. So there's 3 reasons total. Another reason is it takes up more CPU. Reverbs are actually pretty CPU intensive. As a matter of fact, if I pull up my UAD meter here, so here's my UAD meter. UAD is plugins that run on, well, let me just put this on top so it always stays on top. There we go. So they're plugins that run on a separate DSP card. Okay, so it runs on a separate DSP card. And let's just check out this reverb here. I've got UAD reverb, the Lexicon 480L. Look at that. That one reverb takes up half of my DSP. And I've got 2 chips in here. Now, this is an amazing reverb. This reverb sounds fantastic from Lexicon. It's a super famous reverb. But it's taking up so much of my DSP. So I can't use very many of these. I couldn't use this reverb on 10 different tracks. Okay. Now, we got a couple of questions here. Can the send only take 2 buses? Yes, the send can only take 2 buses, but you can have multiple sends. Wait, are you talking about the send or the return? This aux track here can only have 1 input, stereo input. So, yeah, it can only take 2 buses. These over here, you have 10 different sends per track. You can have 10 different sends. Now, and then it's gravity, I don't know how you say that. Is it wrong to do that if it's how you like to run reverb? Yes. It's, so, I'm going to say yes, but there are, of course, exceptions. Let me just keep going here for just a second and just go through all 3 reasons why. So first reason is it's just a pain in the butt if you have to keep changing the reverb, and you're gonna change the reverb. Reverb is something that you're gonna have to change. You're gonna be changing a lot. You're gonna always be making tweaks to the reverb, especially in the beginning while you're still learning how to do this stuff. Reason number two is reverbs are very processor intensive. They can be. Some reverbs are not processor intensive, and that's fine. You can use a whole bunch of them in a track. But as you can see, this Lexicon just took up half of my DSPs. So if I wanted to run a bunch of reverbs, or if I want to run a bunch of instruments into one reverb or something like that, I can do it, but I can't have a bunch of instruments with this reverb on every single track. So that's reason number 2. Reason number 3 is the way that the reverb mixes stuff. You start to get into phasing issues and things like that if you're running multiple reverbs, and it can affect the sound. And this is something that it depends on how good your ears are if you're going to hear it or not. A lot of producers who are doing like modern electronic music don't really notice that stuff because their ears aren't trained. But oh, Jordan, okay, cool. But your ears aren't trained yet, so you're not going to hear it as well. But once your ears get better, you will start to hear phasing issues and things like that. You'll start to hear that the reverb's not quite as full or stuff like that. So it's better if you have one reverb or just a couple of reverbs in the track for various things, that it actually sounds better in the end. But another reason that I'm a big fan of is that it's just like how you think about how reverb works. And here's how reverb works. Like, first of all, what is reverb, right? If we think about what is reverb, somebody want to just tell me what is reverb? And Johan, I'll get to your question in a little bit here. Bus is how we group that question. So how we reverb is basically the sound of the environment that we're in. It's the sound of the room that we are in. That's what reverb is. And so if you go to a concert hall, you're going to hear the reverb in a concert hall. But if you go to like a rock club, it's going to sound very different. If you have like a guitar player who plays on a big concert hall, it's going to sound like this. It'll sound like this, right? But if that same guitar player plays in like a little tiny room, This one's not very good for little tiny rooms actually. Here, let me get a different reverb. So I'm going to go ahead and grab a different reverb here. We're going to use the D-verb again because I can just like flip it around really easy. Okay. So if I go ahead and I put this person in a hall, here's what it would sound like. Or a church. Right? But here's what a room would sound like. These are different spaces that we're creating. And the thing is, if you're going to a concert, everybody is in that room, right? Yes, exactly, Gio, you're saying having one reverb will make the instruments sound like they're in the same space. Makes the track feel cohesive. So everybody's going into the same reverb and all those sounds are getting mixed around and it sounds more natural. This is just how the sounds sound natural. So, just a tad turning, okay, I can turn it up. Let's see. There you go. Turned it up. I also want to make sure, everybody, please make sure that you're using headphones for this because you'll get a lot more out of this if you use headphones rather than just coming from your iPad or your computer speakers. This is a main thing here. So it makes everything, like Gio said, it makes everything feel very cohesive. And everybody else is correct. It's an effect. Thanks. But like Damien says, sound reflections. Johnny says sound reflections. Actually, less than 35 millimeters. Yep. Yep, you're exactly right. All this stuff, these are all reverb sounds. But really what it is, it's the space that we're in. Everything has a reverb. Everything has a reverb, even if you don't really notice it. And as your ears get better, as you develop as a sound engineer and a producer, you're going to start to hear the reverb more and more and more. As a matter of fact, you know how like you walk around New York City and there's like construction and stuff like that happening in any city. It doesn't really matter what city you're in, but there's like construction. And sometimes I'll be walking along talking to my friends, blah, 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 blah. And you walk under like a construction thing and suddenly it changes the sound of your voice. And actually, because my ears are so in tune to that kind of stuff, I always notice it. I'm like, oh, blah, 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 talking. And suddenly I'll come into like a certain space and it has like a weird sound to it. I'll be like, whoa, that's really strange. You're gonna get there too eventually, like where you're like getting, for me, it gets distracting. I can hear the sounds of like the environment that I'm in so much. So it's, this is a really important thing to keep in mind is this stuff. So it's not, so let me just also say there are times when you would want to put a reverb directly on a track. For example, if I have a track where I have a reverb that's like a really special effect, it's like a very particular sound that's just for that one sound, I'll put the reverb directly on that track. A lot of times what I'll do though is I'll actually sample the reverb into the track. I'll sample the sound with the reverb, so it's actually part of the recording. If I have a sound that's that special or that like unique, that's like the sound effect. And you're gonna see, we're gonna talk about this, but you use reverbs for all sorts of stuff like reverse sounds and build-ups and fadeaways and all sorts of cool things. Reverb is not just for natural sounds, it's for all sorts of stuff. Okay, so let's go back in here to our notes. So that's that stuff there. Okay, cool. So this is just kind of talking about the same thing. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set up all my drums now. So here I've got multiple tracks are gonna go into this reverb. So I'm gonna pull up all my drums here, my overhead. I'm not gonna pull up the room sound here because this drum has already been recorded with a room on it. I'm not going to pull that up. I mean, I'm going to pull it up here, but I'm not going to actually turn them on yet. I'm just going to go ahead and, let's see here. I'm going to mute all the other tracks so we're not hearing them. There we go. Cool. I'm going to turn them off so we don't see them. Sweetness. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all my drums. I'm going to send over to this reverb here, except for my room left and right. I'm going to go ahead and keep these separated out. My overheads left and right. I'm going to go ahead and group these together. Cool. So now one controls the other like that. Okay, there we go. So now I got reverb happening from all these. Now if I solo these two tracks out, and I turn up my send, there we go. You hear how that changes the sound of it quite a bit. Let me go ahead and I'm going to turn the reverb on my kick down. Cool. So let's hear the drums without the reverb. There's no reverb. And there's my reverb. Okay, once again, no reverb, right here, and reverb. There you go, cool. Now, again, I've got a lot of reverb sending over here. If I want to change the reverb of my drums, I just go in here and change the reverb. And it doesn't have to be a big change. So here it is now. Let's go ahead and make it smaller. Cool. And now it sounds different. And I'm gonna turn it up so you can hear it more clearly. There's that. Hear how different that sounds? Okay, cool. It sounds very, very different. But it's sounding different across all my drums. I can make these changes really quickly and easily without having to go and change it for every single track. Would you send the guitars to their own reverb or to the same send as the drums? Okay, this is a great question, Gio. Would you send the guitars to their own reverb or to the same send as the drums? Well, it really depends on what you're trying to do here. Remember, when you're the sound engineer or the producer, whatever your role is, if you're in control of this stuff, you're kind of like the director of a film. And film directors, a lot of times the really famous, the really good ones that people love their movies, people talk about, they generally are creating this whole world for people to live in. And that's the same thing that you're going to be doing. You're creating a world for your audience to live in. Now, if your world has guitars in a different room from drums, then you'll use two different reverbs. But if your world includes everybody in the same room, you might put everybody in the same reverb. It really depends on what you're trying to go for. I personally oftentimes will use different reverbs for different sets of instruments, but I also don't work with bands very much. I'm usually doing like electronic music, and in electronic music, you do have a reverb to give it kind of like a feel, like a sound, but it's not exactly the same as I'm creating this real environment for everything to live in. If I'm using strings and stuff or like natural acoustic instruments in my tracks, then I will put them into one space. But other than that, I'm doing a lot of synthesizers and things like that, so I'm kind of not using reverbs in the same way all the time. So it really depends on what I'm doing with stuff. But yeah, a lot of times you do want one kind of reverb over a group of separate instruments that just kind of like pull everything in and make it feel like it's all cohesive. All right. So that screen, this right here in the notes, is just what I just showed you. So the send buses are set the same as the input on the reverb aux. See this right here, and use the send amount to adjust how much reverb is heard for each instrument. Okay, so let's just talk about this idea of buses here for a second. Okay, you can see here it says bus 1 and 2, and this over here says bus 1 and 2. Okay, so this is how different programs make connections to each other. Now, in the audio world, we have a thing called a bus, and this is a very common thing that we have. And the way I think about it is that buses in the audio world are the same as a bus in the real world. So let's just say, for example, I like cheesecake. Actually, I love cheesecake. And I especially love New York cheesecake. And let's say that I'm up at Port Authority. I just got into town and my friend calls me up and my friend says, yo, Tony, I got cheesecake. I'm like, oh man, that's awesome. I can't wait to eat some of that cheesecake. Where are you? And my friend says, I'm down in Meatpacking, downtown a little bit, you know. And I'm like, cool, I'm not that far. I'll come and hang out with you and we're gonna eat some cheesecake together. So what I do, if I'm coming from Port Authority, I'm gonna jump on a bus on 9th Avenue and I'm gonna come down and see my friend down in Meatpacking area. And while I'm on the bus, I might call up some other friends and I might say, yo, there's cheesecake. My friend's got cheesecake. We can all go have cheesecake. All my friends are like, yes, cheesecake, awesome, okay? So then my friends are like, where's the cheesecake? Well, it's down in Meatpacking. Oh, cool, we're all right off at 9th Avenue. So as we go down, the bus can stop and pick up my friends. And we can all get on the bus together. And then we get off at the same stop. And we got our cheesecake. And then it's a cheesecake, like, the happiness party. We're just like eating cheesecake. Oh, it's amazing. Oh, yeah. But how did we get there? We got there from the bus. And this is exactly how buses work in the real world. In audio. The buses in audio work exactly the same as that real world bus. You can take all your different tracks and all the different tracks can get on the bus and the audio can go to one destination, which is pretty cool. Actually, you can even take it a step further and you could say they can go to several different destinations. As long as all the destinations have the same bus number, audio is gonna get taken there. And if anything has the same bus number on the send side of stuff, it's all gonna get taken there. So let me just show you what I mean by that. If I go over here, see my sends here now say bus 1 and 2. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say no send. There we go, no send. And I'm going to change the send on my input here to say bus 13 and 14. Now, over here for these tracks, I'm going to change these buses to say 13 and 14. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do it to 1 first and copy it over because that's going to be a little bit faster. So I go over here and I set the bus to say 13 and 14. I'm going to turn it up. And now I'm just going to drag it over so they all say 13 and 14. Whoops. There we go. And now when I hit play, we're going to hear that reverb. There you go. Okay, so now we can see it. So let's just see what are y'all saying here. Steve, you are here. All right, cool. Sweetness. There you go. Maria says, you lost me in the beginning, but brought it back. Cool. Okay, good. Andre says, I feel like a lot of us got used to this the wrong way. Instead of seeing that invisible line that connects the tracks, everything was misconceived as being individual on each track. Yep. You could write a whole movie script with that illustration you just gave. Awesome. So, Andre, you're absolutely right. I have seen productions from people. There's a couple things that people always mess up because they start off with these bad habits and then they get so used to it and they learn how to make it sound good enough. They learn how to make it sound good enough. And there's a difference between a sound that's like good enough and it's okay and it squeaks by to a producer who's really, really amazing. And there's another thing that comes into play here too. A lot of people who are making they're making productions for themselves. They're just like artists that are making productions for themselves, and they're not doing this as a job necessarily. They might have a hit that does pretty well, but for you to have a job doing this, you have to have a string of successes. One hit, unless it's just a smash hit, and even these days, that doesn't pay as much as it used to. You're not going to make a living really doing it that way. I mean, if you keep in mind, to live in New York City, really, you want to be making $4,000 a month to really have a good solid living in New York City. And that's like the low end of a solid living. That's the low end of it. $4,000 a month is a lot to bring in off of making music. It's not impossible, but it's a lot if you're doing it wrong. And if you're putting a reverb on every single track and you're taking a week to mix a track, that's great. That's fine if you're just doing this, as an artist and you're kind of like just going track by track by track. But if you're trying to make a living doing this and you're trying to make $1,000 a day from mixing albums, then you're going to have to have a setup where you can quickly change the reverb for multiple tracks at the same time. And that's just one of the reasons why it's good to use reverb like this. So I've seen tracks and I've heard tracks that sound great with reverbs all over the place, but it's not a great way to continue working. It's like fine in the beginning. And as you said, Andre, it's a bad habit and it's hard to change how we work on stuff. But my advice is change it. Change it now. This is why you're paying, good money to have me talk to you. It's because I'm going to come in here and say like, yeah, that'll work for now, but let's do it the right way. And this is the right way. Now, again, I don't want to say that you're never going to have a reverb on one track directly. It's going to happen sometimes. But I want you to have a very good reason why you're doing that. If you turn in a project to me and you show me a project and you've got a reverb on a specific track, I will say to you, why do you have this reverb on this track? And if you're like, oh, it's because that reverb is just like a special effect on that part of the voice and it's just a really special effect reverb and I just wanted to have it right there on that part, then I'll be like, okay, cool, that works, fine, no problem. I might say, why didn't you just bounce that reverb down and just bake it into the track if it's that much of a unique sound? Yeah, there we go. Cool. Are there any other thoughts about that reverb thing? I mean, I think y'all are getting it. I think so. Cool. All right. Let me go over here to this preview here. Okay. Let's talk about this external input thing. We don't really talk about this too much here. But the external input is just if you want to have input coming in from somewhere else. I don't have on me a key. Actually, I do have a keyboard thing. I do have a little thing actually upstairs. You know what? Let's come back to this. I'll show you after the break. I'll come back and I'll show you this because I do want to show you exactly what I'm talking about here with this. So we're going to come back and talk about this. All right. You may have seen me do Solo Safe, and you may have heard me talk about Solo Safe. Solo Safe, what it does is it enables a track to always be playing, like to always pass audio through when you solo something. So for example, right now my drum reverb here is Solo Safed. I'm going to unsolo safe it. So it's the command key. So I'm going to make it so it's unsolo safed. And now if I'm soloing my reverb, my snare drum, if I'm playing my drums, you can hear there's reverb on the snare drum, there's reverb on the other drums. But when I solo this, watch what happens. Hear how that reverb sound goes away and it sounds completely different now. Well, the reason why it did that was because when I hit solo on this snare drum here, my reverb did not get soloed. So I would have to solo the snare drum and solo the reverb to get the same kind of sound, right? That's a huge pain. We don't want to have to do that all the time. So what I can do is I can command click the solo button here and it solos that. So now, if I just solo my snare drum, we're still hearing the reverb on it. It sounds a little bit different because of this part here. Because these are the overheads, which are overhead microphones that are picking up everything. Okay, so it does sound a little bit different because of that, but I'm not going to solo safe this audio track. So really, what you want to have happen is any aux tracks, see how I have it written right here? Always solo safe aux tracks. Aux tracks, like 98% of the time, you're going to solo safe them because Usually when you solo something, you want to keep going through the aux track. But never solo safe audio tracks. And the reason why is because audio tracks, you usually don't want them to solo safe. You don't want them to play all the time. Let me just give you an example. If I solo safe my kick drum, I just hold down Command and I click it. If I solo safe the kick drum, now we can hear the kick drum and it's fine. But if I hit solo on my snare drum, we're going to still hear that kick drum. That's probably not what we want. If we're soloing the snare drum, we probably just want to hear the kick drum. The snare drum. We just want to hear the snare drum and not both. So that's the solo safe thing. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good explanation of things. I don't think we need to keep going about that. All right. So insert effects. Hey, and we get to see my awesome guitar player drawing. Gang, gang, gang. Right? Guitar. I don't play guitar, by the way. I know it looked like perfect guitar form. And you're like, wow, Tony must be an awesome guitar player. I'm not. Full disclosure. Okay. Insert effects. The reason why I have this guitar player on here is because if you are a guitar player, you know that you have guitar pedals. Who in here is a guitar player? Raise your hand. Me, not me. Just kidding. I can't see you. Okay, so what you've got, if you play guitars, you got these pedals. The pedals are just insert effects. So, for example, you got a fuzz pedal, distortion pedal, EQ, something like that, right? If I have a fuzz pedal or distortion pedal, if I turn that pedal off and I play my guitar, it's like bring, 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 bring. But if I turn it on, it's going to go. It's the same note. It's the same chords that I'm playing, but one sounds like a regular guitar with no effects, bring, and one sounds like it's got distortion on it, right? And that's what an insert effect does. An insert effect changes the entire sound of the signal flowing through them. This is what an insert effect is. The send effect, if we remember, we just talked about send effects. The send effect, to send the signal, you're splitting the signal. Here, let's just go up here. We're splitting the signal. You can see the signal is going from here and it's going from here. But an insert effect, we're changing the entire signal. So some effects that are insert effects are like these here: compressors, limiters, EQs, gate, distortion, chorus, flanger, phaser, filter, wah. These are insert effects. These are sounds that you would expect to change the entire signal. Sounds that are send effects, effects that are send effects are reverbs and delays. These, we want to send multiple sounds to them. We don't want them to change the whole signal. We still want to have some of that dry signal. Now, I just want to point out that these insert effects, some of these insert effects don't change the sound that much. Like an EQ. An EQ, we can change the sound a lot or a little. Let's put an EQ on that kick drum and listen to it. There's my kick drum. Let's put an EQ on here. I'm going to use an EQ. I'm going to use, this is not an EQ that comes with Pro Tools. I'm going to use the FabFilter Pro Q3. The reason I'm going to use this is because we can see the whole frequency here. Okay. Now, if I go ahead and I put this EQ here and I turn it up right here, you're not going to hear it much. If I turn it up a lot, you start to hear that snare drum come out, right? Because we're right at the right frequency for snare drums, right? We can see the frequency here. We can see it moving around. And that's not what we want, actually. We want to get rid of that snare drum. We're going to get rid of that snare drum in just a minute, right? But you can tell, you can hear, it's if I crank it, you can hear it. But if I don't crank it, you can't hear it very much. And that's just the nature of EQs. EQs are really, really important, but it's kind of hard to hear an EQ without changing it a lot, especially in the beginning. And this is all these effects that we're going to talk about. Sorry about that. All these effects that we're going to talk about, including reverbs and stuff, you have to train your ear to hear these. It's going to take a while for you to actually be able to hear really well what these different effects are doing. And in the beginning, you're going to overuse them. And that's fine. That's how you learn what these things sound like. You're going to listen to mixes a year from now or 2 years from now that you're doing now, and you're going to be like, wow, there's too much reverb, or wow, there's too much compression, or wow, there's too much EQ. And the reason why is because now your ears are learning. We're training our ears. You have to train your ears to hear things. And Johnny, I'm just saying your name because I know you've been doing this for a little while, and I know you're pretty good. You said you're Pro Tools certified, so you've been training your ears. And I bet you can agree with me when I say that, your ears are going to change a lot over time. Andre, probably you too. And I'm just saying your names because I've been talking with you guys, and I know you guys both produce, and you've been producing for a few years now. As you go through this, your hearing is going to change. Your ears are going to get better, right? So now this EQ here, it's not a big difference. I can go ahead and I can bring out the low end. I can get rid of the low end here. You can get some pop or click in there like this, right? You can see it's going on, but it's not a big change. If I were to put a distortion on here, however, let me put a distortion on here. Harmonic. Let's use Decapitator. I like Decapitator. It's from Sound Toys. You should definitely get that effect rack from Sound Toys. Actually, I don't know if they're still doing it anymore. I think they may have stopped it on April 28th. So here's the Decapitator. Decapitator is a great one. Let's go to 70s record. Let's listen to the 70s record on this kick drum. Hear how different that sounds? Right, sorry, I know these are... Andre says, I have projects I basically had to rebuild because what was 3 to 5 years ago was so different, and the difference is insane. Never throw out anything and go back to it after a few years. I absolutely agree. First of all, don't ever throw anything out. Do not, because you never know who you're going to start working with in the future. That's a good, and then another reason is because, especially now that you're getting serious about this, you're coming to SAE or you're watching YouTube videos or whatever it is you're doing, you're getting very serious about your productions. Well, then what ends up happening is now you start learning about this stuff, and then you have some songs you're working on now, and you're like, I love this song. The song's amazing. And then a couple years later, you come back to it, and you're like, wow, I didn't know how to produce back then, but the song is still amazing. So you can go back and you can change it up. Another good reason why you should never throw stuff away is because even when you reach like a level where you're selling music and you're doing stuff, you might have some songs that just don't have a good home right now. And then you come back you meet up with somebody 3 to 5 years later or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I need a song that's like this. And you're like, wait, hold on a second. I have a song like that from 5 years ago. And then they listen to it, they're like, this is dope, but I want you to change this, or I want you to change this. And if you keep the session, you can go back and change it, no problem. So that stuff happens all the time. All right, so here's the Decapitator sound. Right, hear that? That nasty boof, boof type of thing going on here. That's an example of something you can hear a lot, right? So that's an insert effect, but it's an insert effect that you hear a lot. All right, so there's that. Now, let's go ahead and look over here. Okay, so in this case here, the send effect, we can see in this picture here, we've got our insert effects, which are the pedals, and the send effect is like coming from the microphone here, send to a reverb here. It's a different track, and you can see how the tracks are set up here. I've got some tracks that are send effects and some tracks like my inserts here directly on the guitar pedal. And we could do the same thing here. I've got my send effects are this reverb here. My insert effects are going to go on the tracks directly. So we can set up everything to go on the tracks directly. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Boop-a-doop. So one insert effect that I really want to show you right now is our gate. And we talked about the gate the other day, and I said we'd kind of dive into it a little bit deeper, and we are. And here we are diving into it deeper. And we're going to talk about this stuff here. Let's see. Okay, the gate. I'm going to put the gate in the beginning here. Now, what I'm going to use this gate for is, listen to this kick drum. It's the kick drum microphone, but you can hear the snare drum is also here in the kick drum. And we don't want to hear the snare drum inside the kick drum. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go to my dynamics, and I'm going to choose Dyne 3 expander gate. Okay, we're going to use the gate here. And now what we're going to do is when I push play, this is going to cut out the sounds that are lower than this threshold here. So let's just listen to this real quick. I'm going to turn it up so y'all can hear it a little bit better. Okay, and now you can hear it got rid of the other sounds. Let's bypass this. So we can hear the snare drum. Cool. Hold on one second. I'm sorry. Hold on one second. All right. My girlfriend is taking out the trash recycling, and it looks like a Cirque du Soleil. She's like stacking boxes on top of boxes. Oh, Damien, you came back. Okay, yeah, you're going to have to rewatch the video. I'm glad we're recording this because, yeah, Brooklyn Internet. I hear that. All right, so we got the expander gate is on here. So, yeah, that was her, like, stacking boxes and stuff like that. All right, so here's my kick drum without all the other stuff. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make adjustments here. So first of all, if I want to get the click in the beginning of the kick drum, I got to make sure my attack is nice and quick because it's going to open up the gate every time that kick drum hits. If I put it over here, hear how it sounds fluffy? Right? I don't want that sound. I want the attack to be quick. So I get the punch of the kick. Okay? Now, I don't want the kick drum to be too long. So I'm going to put my hold down. The hold is how long the gate stays open. And now, I'm going to turn up the release. If I turn down the release a lot, hear how like you're going to hear a pop and a click on it? So I'm just going to adjust this release here. There we go. And I'm going to turn the threshold up just a little bit. You hear how some of the other sounds are kind of bleeding through a little bit here? There we go. Cool. That sounds pretty good. All right. Now, here's the cool thing about these plugins, these insert effects, is that I've got these insert effects here on the drum. I've got this gate here on the drum. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shape the sound from here. So I'm going to use this gate and the first part here to get rid of all the extra sounds. And now I've just got my kick drum sound. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some other effects to shape that kick drum sound. I want that kick drum to be a little bit more punchy, a little bit more boom, right on the front there. So there's a couple of effects I can use. The main one that we would use traditionally is a compressor. So here I've got a compressor, and this compressor here, I'm going to listen to this. I'm going to turn up my ratio. The ratio is okay here. And what I'm going to do is a compressor, what it does is it actually turns down the level of stuff. See how I turn it down? It's just like lowering the sound of my kick drum. Right? What I can do is I'm going to let the front through a little bit here. And now we can hear the beginning of that kick drum has like a little bit more pop to it. If I want my kick drum to be really thin and just poppy, I can turn my threshold down even more. I'm going to take that reverb off my kick drum a little bit. Right, you can hear that a little bit. Here, let's turn that reverb down, but not off. Cool. All right. And now what I can do is I can shape this kick drum. Now that don't have all the other sounds going on with it, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of some of this real low end here on this. I'm going to go ahead and bring up some of this pop. And if I want some more thump, I can just bring that up a little bit more too. Awesome. Now let's go over here and just focus on the snare drum. And I'm going to do this to a few of the drums so you can just kind of see it a few times here with these different effects. Okay? So my snare drum, let's listen to the snare drum. And you can hear the snare drum has the overhead, but has the hi-hat in it. But I want to get the hi-hat from my overhead. So I don't want to get the hi-hat from my snare drum. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same effects. I'm going to use the exact same effects as I used from my kick drum, but they're going to be different settings. So I'm going to go over here. First effect is going to be the expander gate. Here we go. And now we're going to use this to cut out some of those sounds. We're going to gate out the sounds. So essentially all the sounds that are not the snare drum, I want to get rid of those. So we're going to turn this up here like this. There we go. I turn up my threshold. And that sounds pretty good actually. Now let's bypass it so we can hear it by itself. You can hear how you have all the hi-hats in there. And if I turn it back on, okay, and now it's working well. Now let's just go take a look at, let's explain this gate in detail here a little bit real quick. I actually have this in the notes from last week. We talked about it last week when we talked about, I think, playlists? Yep, strip silence. Here we go. So here's the manual gate. And let's just take a look at this and listen to this snare drum sound here. So a manual gate, basically, it's a gate. And a gate, the audio version of a gate, is exactly how a gate in the real world works, kind of like our buses. A gate is something that opens and closes and lets something go through. So if I have a gate on my house, in my yard, people have to open it and then they can go through. And then I can close the gate and people don't go through. Well, a gate in the audio world works the same way. When the gate is open, the sound comes through. And when the gate closes, the sound stops. And what gates are used for is for making quiet sounds silent and letting loud sounds be heard. Okay? So we have here a signal here where it's got like some silence going on here. And this is like, it's not quite silence, it's like some sounds. Like in our case, we have our snare drum sound here, and it's going like that. So here, let me play that real quick so you can hear it. Here. Okay, so we got that there. And now, if we have our, hold on one second. So, where was I? So the snare drum here, with the expander gate here, you can hear it like this. Wait, real quick. Johan says the send setting goes to every channel on the bus, or you can change the setting individually. Might be a dumb question. It's not a dumb question, but it's definitely going to. You can change the setting individually. That's why you use the send. See how these different buses have this here? You can change each setting individually. But the inserts are, well, actually, I'm not sure. If I understand your question correctly, so just real quick, hold on. I'm going to come back to that question because that's like off topic from what we're talking about right now. Right now we're talking about inserts. So, and then also Limosicle, I don't know who that person is, but don't engage that person. That's like a goofy comment that they're just trying to troll. So don't engage. All right. So, so this expander gate here, so the hi-hats, you can hear the hi-hats coming through like that, okay? And then if I go here, so the hi-hats is like this little blue part down here. It's like this blue part down here. It's like and the snare drum is this part up here, the louder section here. So the snare drum comes up over the threshold. We set the threshold at a certain level, and you want the threshold to be just above the level of the hi-hats. So what we're going to do here is, let's bypass this, let's hear it. And you can see here's where my threshold is set right here. So if I turn this threshold all the way down, we're going to hear everything. It's just going to be open the entire time. It doesn't sound different at all. But if I turn this threshold up, I start to turn the threshold up, what we're going to hear is we're going to eventually hear that hi-hat disappear because the hi-hat's a lot quieter than the snare drum. Right? And there you go. And now we've got a really good snare drum sound, and we've got rid of that hi-hat sound. And that's basically how you use a gate. Okay, now a couple things in here. One, we got this attack. The attack is our level. That's like, if I set the attack level longer, see how it gets fluffy? That's because it's like ramping up into the sound. When the gate opens up, it doesn't open up quickly. It opens up like slowly. So that's why it sounds kind of fluffy. And if I turn my attack level faster, now you're going to hear the beginning of that snare drum. Right? Now, the hold is how long the gate's going to stay open. And this is all right here in the, like this. So the threshold is the level where the gate opens. The hold is how long the gate will remain open. And when it opens, how long does it stay open? Does it stay open for a long time or a short time? And then the attack is how quickly the gate will open after the threshold is released, and the release is how quickly it closes. So for snare drums, you want those two to be fairly quick-ish because they're short sounds. So if I set this hold for too long, listen to what happens. After it opens, we're going to hear that hi-hat afterwards, and we don't want that. Right? So I'm going to turn this down. You don't want it too short because now it's like we're not hearing the meat of the snare drum. So we're going to turn it up a little bit. Now we can hear the meat of the snare drum, and the release is okay, but I'm going to turn this up again If we turn it up too much, you're going to hear those notes after the threshold gets opened. Cool. Right there sounds great to me. Okay, there we go. Awesome. So now let's listen to this. Let's listen to the snare drum here with the kick drum. Wait, kick and the snare, sorry, not everything else. I just mute all these. There we go. Awesome, sounding good so far. Okay, now let's go ahead and make that snare drum pop a little bit more. We're gonna put a compressor in here. And again, I'm kind of over-exaggerating these sounds so that y'all can hear them. This is not exactly, I wouldn't make things pop so hard with a track like this, because this has like a more of a vintage sound to it. But I'm just showing you this so you can hear everything. So now the compressor here. The compressor is kind of like the opposite of the snare drum-ish. What it does is that instead of like opening up, it actually turns things down. Compressors was something that's kind of, they've been around for a long time. What they do is they literally, it's like somebody who has their hand on the gate, on the fader, and they're just turning things up and down as stuff gets louder and softer. So, for example, back in the day, if I was recording my vocals and I'm singing like this, la 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 la, and then I get to a loud part, la 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 la, like that, well, what happens is that's going to clip. So I want to turn it down as I'm recording it. So there would be a person in the room, and as I started to get louder, la 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 la, they would turn the fader down. They would just go turn the fader down. And then as I get softer again, they would turn the fader back up. And that's all it's doing is just turn the volume up and down. So as I get louder, it turns the volume down. And as I get softer, I turn the volume back up again. And what they did was they realized eventually we can automate this. We can use a machine to do this instead of just having a human turning things up and down. And it can work a lot better, a lot faster response time, stuff like that. And you don't have to you're not constantly turning things up and down. Like this is hard to do, to turn things up and down like this. So they created compressors. That's literally all a compressor is doing. A compressor is just turning the volume down when things get loud and it's turning it back up when it gets soft. And it's doing it by some settings that we set right here. By the way, it took me forever to understand compressors because I never had somebody teach me compressors like I'm teaching you compressors. I never had that person until I'd been using a compressor for years. I actually bought my first compressor in probably like, I don't know, like 93 or 94 or 95, somewhere in there. And because I was reading articles with people who were talking about, you know, how they get their drums to be so fat, how they get their sounds to be so good. And they were talking about drums and like stuff like this. And like they were always talking about compressors. Oh yeah, we use compressors and this and that and whatever. I was like, cool, I got to go out and buy a compressor. And I went out and I bought a compressor and I looked in the manual and it was like, you know, because it was a piece of hardware. It didn't have presets on it. It just was in the, you know, piece of hardware. And the manual, it said, you know, here's some settings for drums. Here's some settings for vocals. I was like, cool. And I set those settings and it didn't change anything, or I didn't know how to make it change stuff. And I had no idea how to work a compressor because really you need to have, like, it helps to have somebody explain stuff or having good presets in there. So when I went to London, I became friends with the engineer at the school I was attending. The school I was attending was not a recording school. It was a classical music school. And I was there and I became friends with her. And one day I was like, wait, you know how to use compressors? And she was like, yeah, I know how to use compressors. I was like, can you explain to me how a compressor works? And she was like, yeah, the threshold is where you start compressing. So the sound gets louder and it goes like this, louder. The threshold is where it's going to turn on. And then the compressor turns the sound down. I was like, oh my gosh, that explains everything. So that's how we explain this stuff. So let me go down here. Only put reverbs on buses because I see you putting effects directly on the tracks. Okay, so DJ Blood Money says, so would you only put reverbs on buses because I see you putting effects directly on the track? And that's not true. But let's come back to it, okay? And then Andre says, because only a few tracks will have things like a compressor and more tracks will have reverbs and delays, so the effects that are on more tracks get sent to aux track. Ish, not exactly. I mean, a lot of people have like, especially modern electronic producers, put like effects like compressors and sends, compressors and EQs and stuff on almost every single track. They're very different things though, but let's come back and talk about it real quick. Let me just finish this with the snare drum, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Because now we can start to look at it. The more effects I have on tracks, the more we can look at this stuff. But let's do this. Actually, let's take a break. Let's take a 15-minute break right now, and we're gonna come back at 11:15. All right? I need to rest my voice. I need to get some more water. So let's take a 15-minute break, because we went for an hour and a half, and we're going to come back at 11:15, and we're going to go until noon, and we're going to take a 10-minute break at noon. Okay? So let's be back in a few minutes. I'm going to put on my break time like that. Oh, look at how peaceful that is, and my cat. And break time right there. And we're going to be back at 11:15. All right? Cool. See you in a few.